So now that we're through the Keighley Summerfest, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
All right. Do you think E3 proper will ever come back?
It already did.
Form? What?
Yeah.
What?
It's the same thing. Like, I think the difference now is that
the digital...
No, the costs are all distributed now. So, like, some people are holed up in hotel rooms and, maybe they don't need an entire conference.
I know, I'm all about everybody being in the same place at the same time, but...
And I think they just, by way of a painful death of the name of the previous thing, I think they just got to the more cost-efficient version of that.
So, what is the... how does the communication work between, like, Sony timed their state of play a couple days before, Microsoft did their thing on Sunday, and then Ubisoft was the day after, and it's like, they're still coordinating, so...
And my understanding is that Keighley is doing some of that coordination. Like, they all want to be attached to all the eyeballs on everybody.
Brandon?
Is it all what?
Like the Microsoft...
Brandon?
No,
like Joe Biden?
Is it branded? Like, as the Xbox thing was significantly bigger and more...
So, yeah, well, that's the thing, right?
I mean, I know that was a pre-recorded video, not
No,
live
if you're Microsoft, you can just say, we have a bunch of stuff to announce, here's our live stream, and people will tune in. But you do get network effects. It's like why fast food restaurants are always next to each other is because it's like, you might not want McDonald's, but there's Wendy's right there, right? And like same thing is like
I'm just hankering for something.
No, they all get benefits from those network effects, so they are all loosely affiliated. But I think without
some games were even at both. I just didn't know if they ever said the phrase Summer Games Fest at any of the other.
No, but
but
the same YouTube channels were broadcasting all of them. So
I saw that. Yeah,
there is,
including his channel,
exactly.
the Game Awards channel.
That's exactly what I mean. That's how you know that there is some collaboration and coordination.
All right, so let me rephrase that. What about the words?
No, that's banned. That's who shall not be named or whatever. Yeah.
They also had like in-person events that were like down the block from each other.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't at like the convention center or anything.
Well, no, but it turns out that if you just buy a bunch of warehouses and shuffle everybody back and forth, then it's the same thing.
Yeah, like the play days, I think, are hosted out of a garage.
Yeah. So it's like those are less crowded because people are at the Microsoft thing or people are at some other thing.
I want the spectacle back. I want D-list celebrities, endorsing something they don't understand.
At the Game Awards, you'll get Al Pacino struggling to read the teleprompter.
I was going to say, that's not a fault of E3 being dead. That's a fault of video games getting too big. You don't get D-list. You don't get Jamie Kennedy anymore. We get Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves and Jordan Peele.
I'll take all that. It's just more of like, I missed the mess. Everything's too manicured now.
Yeah. That's what happens when your $100 million industry turns into a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Bring back the people playing laser tag or whatever.
You're pining for E3 from like the 2000s.
I am, yeah.
And it hasn't been that way for a decade before it died, which was already 5 years ago. So
go play Wonder Book and see if you still can't figure out why that version of E3 is gone.
Well, I mean, what was the last time anybody put on an event that was like a disaster? It doesn't happen anymore.
Exactly.
Oh.
Sony did the State of Play like a week and a half ago.
Burn.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, we sat down and discussed the founding and history of one of the industry's largest and most important companies, Valve Software. Developer of games, publisher of games, distributor of games. Their impact has been colossal, to put it mildly. And what more is there to say? Plenty more, actually, because our friends out in Bellevue, Washington have been up to quite the journey since we covered them before. In fact, we never got into their big jump in, like, not only the PC hardware and VR markets, but also their recent invasion onto the portable handheld space. So how exactly did they get there? What was the response? And what's next for them in the future? Thankfully, longtime guest, first-time host, Andrew Banks is here with The Scoop. I'm Randall Beatrice, and with us as well is Austin Blakesley, of course.
Hello.
This is Hot Button. And, so the floor is yours.
Yeah, here I am with The Scoop.
You pronounced Bellevue wrong.
What did I say?
Bellevue.
Bellevue is what I heard?
Yeah.
Did I actually write that?
I don't know, but it's funny.
Well,
It wouldn't be a Hot Bun episode if I didn't correct your pronunciation of a place.
That's
or name.
This one wasn't even that exotic.
No, it's just Seattle.
I'm going to have one or two in here that I struggle with. So
you just write at the Simpsons bit when they're holding up the names of the various cities with funny names, like, and then he says Seattle, and it just loses. All right.
Well, we all know Valve, game and software developer.
Never heard of him.
And we all know Steam, the hit PC game distribution
Whoa,
platform.
Steve comes out of Valve. That's crazy.
Oh, that's why it's called that.
But what would it... You ruined a bit that's coming up in like 3 sentences.
Sorry. I make that joke every time someone says Steam and Valve in the same sentence.
But what would it look like if the leaders at Valve attempted to become the new Nintendo, developing games and hardware simultaneously to ambitiously attempt to redefine what video games are capable of?
I know you're setting something
the
up.
The Amiibo guys?
I know you're setting something up, but if Valve were to become Nintendo, this industry would be so much worse off.
Debatable. We'll get to that too.
They're less litigious.
Well, yeah, everybody's less litigious than Nintendo.
Yeah, Valve is more likely to get sued than to do the suing. Surely with the successes they've had as game designers and software distributors, they could replicate their success in hardware, right? Well, the question might be tricky to answer, and to get there, we're going to have to navigate all sorts of puns, much like how Steam is a pun on the name Valve itself. And we'll be keeping track of those puns with this sound.
Okay.
All right. First, we're going to have to go back in time to the year 2012.
Wait, is that... No, that's Mr. Caffeine.
That's Mr. Caffeine. All right, so back in 2012, Windows 7 was an operating system that had nearly universally liked. It was performant and full-featured, but everything comes to an end.
It was better than what came after.
Well, so what did come after was Windows 8 in August 1st, 2012, aimed at adapting Windows to the emerging mobile computing landscape.
Old.
Yeah. The idea was to accommodate touchscreens better, sharing look and feel somewhat across phones, tablets, and PCs, and the results were mixed, and that might be generous.
When did the Surface come out, like the first one?
About that year.
Okay,
about that time.
That's what I remember.
So
you know what's crazy? I worked at a job where I had to use Windows 8 Server, and running a server on that interface was a nightmare.
Oh, that sounds like hell, actually. Many critics and users noted that the OS was significantly more locked down. Mobile paradigms often didn't make sense in a desktop setting.
No.
And Microsoft was trying to drive you to their app store. So yeah, like that mobile app thing is why that server thing sounds so bad, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's like...
They're still trying to get you to
Well, yeah, they're like two different settings menus, and one looks like it was made for a mouse, and the other looks like it was made for a touchscreen.
It's so, like... everything in that is so disparate. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's like all the various sizes of things.
I mean, the first version of Windows 8 was literally like... it would run Windows as an app.
On top of...
Like when you went to desktop mode, it would run Windows desktop mode as a mobile app. They patched that eventually down the road to make Windows 8 usable. But that was their idea for getting Windows to run on tablets, but then they also did that on computers, and it was a nightmare.
Jeez.
So about that app store, though, by this time, Apple had already made it clear that they could print money by making you acquire all of your software from the app store on their mobile devices, which is where they got a cut of everything sold. So this isn't how Windows users are used to getting their software. And for games in particular, they frequently go through a different middleman getting a cut of every sale, and that's Steam.
I think I said Epic Games. No, just
oh, weird, yeah.
They're far away from
Mac
that.
also had a smaller version of the same controversy in Mac OS X 10 point something. They introduced the same thing where you had to buy apps through the App Store.
Well, they're still on 10 point something.
Yes.
Is this very recent?
No.
Oh.
This was years ago. This was, I believe, after Windows tried it.
Okay.
But Apple fans were more susceptible to it, or Apple's more better at enforcing it. But
you're right.
Maybe this is jumping ahead a little bit, but I figured that if Apple was going to I figured that's why they were switching over their Macs to their new processors, is so that way they could say, well, everything is basically the same kind of device, so you may as well just get all your software through us. Whoops.
No, they've been doing that for years.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so this threat of everything going through the Windows Store was something that Valve was very concerned by, which I would imagine so. It is their entire lifeblood.
No, I understand. It's just in retrospect, like.
So yeah, and I'll get to. We'll get there too. Okay. Sorry, I get to throw in my first. We'll get there, right?
Sure.
All right. Yeah. So Gabe Newell is quoted as saying, "I think Windows 8 is a catastrophe for everyone in the PC space." And I've got a note here that more people than just Gabe Newell work at Valve. Weird, but he's the guy that all the press want to talk to. So most quotes will be from him.
You got the bald guy with the valve in the back of his neck, and then you got the other guy with the valve in his eye.
The guys that made Firewatch.
Oh, right. I forgot that.
Gordon Freeman's there with a crowbar, just, I don't know, prying things open, apparently.
Shell.
He does speak for the company a lot, though, which is different than, like,
so that's,
I know they have reps, but
that's kind of what I'm saying is, like, there are a lot of people at Valve that can do a lot of independent work, but
even people who are only tangentially following the industry, like, know who he is.
So, and some of that came down to the fact that he very publicly gave his email address out years ago, and would just respond to people, which isn't very common. They were a much smaller company then, but still, it was like, so it was some of that, and also the fact that, he ultimately does have to sign off on everything, even if it's people do have autonomy.
Yeah, they're still private. We talked about this last night.
And he's been there since the beginning. So all of that adds together to be like, people kind of just want to hear from him, even if he's not.
He was at E3 talking about the PlayStation 3.
Okay, now listen, when you said he was at E3, I thought you meant recently, and it's like, no, that's not actually E3 anymore. We just had this discussion. What is wrong with me? All right. If Windows forced everyone to get their software through the Windows Store, this is a huge threat to Valve's business model, which relies on the general hands-off approach to software that most industries built on Windows have taken for granted. Steam already existed on the Mac at this point, but not only was it a much smaller market share than Windows, but Microsoft got these ideas from Apple, so they're probably not much better off relying on Apple, who are historically not very savvy when it comes to games anyway. If only there were some other way. Oh, I know. There's Linux.
Oh, the thing that you for the PS2.
The PS3. They got sued over removing it.
No, there was Linux on PS2.
Was there?
Yeah.
Oh, news to me.
It was actually a package with, like, a physical disc, a keyboard, a mouse, all PlayStation branded, and the hard drive.
That's adorable.
Yeah. I know because I've been trying to find one. I'm fascinated by that, like, on the PS2.
Randy, tell me what Linux is.
It's an operating system, or with the little penguin guy.
So I've got a note here that says Randy gets it wrong, so throw to Austin who gets it right.
I was right about the penguin.
Does have a penguin.
Linux is a kernel of an operating system that could be spun off into separate operating systems.
Correct. Well, so yeah, Linux is technically the kernel of an operating system, which is the core of it that connects hardware to software, and other software is built on top of the kernel, providing your general desktop environment and default applications, and that would form a Linux-based operating system. But colloquially...
I don't know what you're talking about. It's all clicks and buzzes to me.
Colloquially, unless you're being a dick about it, like I just was, we often just call it Linux. So, so you're kind of right.
There are some Unix-based operating systems that aren't Linux, like the Macintosh.
Yep, which is based on BSD. My understanding is that most console operating systems, except for Xbox, are based on BSD. I could be wrong on that.
And the Dreamcast.
The Dreamcast was Windows.
Yeah, so if you want to put a pin in that, and we'll come back to why that is, I'm going to get to some stuff about licensing, and when we get to that, you can remind me. Because I don't think I have that note in the script, but also, I guess I may as well put in a disclosure here for the audience. I did write this script about 2 years ago, and then I don't know.
Things happened.
Yeah, something happened. I can't quite remember what it was, but I actually can.
It escapes me.
So anyway, this one kept on getting kicked down the road, and I did my best to update it over time as we kept on scheduling this and then not doing this episode for a while. But in any case,
I had to do that with a script recently. I don't remember what it was.
Chameleon? No.
No. It was maybe I'll spoil slightly. We're doing an episode on the 13 remake at some point.
Oh, okay.
And since the time I finished that script, they went back and remade the game with a different developer. You're like, well, back to the on board.
Okay. There's something important about Linux, and to find out what that is, we have to go back in time to 1991.
Oh.
So,
91, eh?
Operating systems have a long history back to universities, where they were frequently named by programmers who all think they're clever and great at naming things. In the late 60s, there was an operating system called Multics, and Multics didn't really mean anything to you or I, but it sounds like multiple, right? Sure. So when Bell Labs made their own OS, as a play on the word Multics, they called theirs Unix. Unix, of course, famously controls all of Jurassic Park, where nothing ever went wrong.
Oh my God, that's right. I've heard. Okay, yeah. All right. Say the magic word.
Andrew Tenenbaum created a minimalist Unix-like operating system at, this is the one where I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Vrije University in Amsterdam, that he called Minix.
Boy, they're so creative.
So when Finnish programmer Linus Torvalds built his own version of Minix, he called it Linux.
God damn it.
Because his name.
Some of what makes Linux so important was written into the original newsgroup post that Linus put up in July of 1991. And though Linus saw his work as duplication of efforts of things like Minix, he notes that he enjoyed working on it, and he reaches out for others to contribute and port their software to his new kernel. Right away, Linux is built on freely sharing code to collaboratively make a better operating system. So Linus thought his operating system project would be outshined by another upcoming OS called Herd. Herd was an OS in development as a part of GNU, a collection of free software, and GNU is a recursive acronym that stands for GNU's Not Unix.
What? You're making these up.
Nope. Somehow, Herd is an even dumber recursive acronym, and to save some time, just trust me on this, we need 2 more dings.
I gotta give it a second.
Herd never came out because it turns out Linux did what Herd was going to do and it did it better. And it's no secret that I'm a Linux nerd. I named my dog Sudo after a Linux command after all. But imagine if we had Herd nerds instead.
That's all nerds.
The GNU project was helpful in providing...
Yeah, I didn't do anything that dorky like name my dog after a Rainbow Six Siege character. Game I don't even play anymore.
My cats all have normal names.
Like Mario and Luigi.
Yeah. Zag.
The GNU project was still helpful in providing free software to sit on top of the Linux kernel, and also the GNU General Public License, or GPL. This is a form of copyleft that ensures that free software stays free.
Get it?
What?
Copy left instead of copyright.
Yeah. That's why we had the pun counter. All right.
What is wrong with all of you people? Why do they keep doing this?
They're all programmers, dude. I just told you. This is how they name software.
There's a reason you named this podcast.
Okay? It ensures that free software stays free. Copyleft software licenses, they hijack copyright law to protect open source software and keep it open. Companies are free to use Linux in whatever they want, but if they make changes to it, the source code needs to be made available, and this means that improvements are upstreamed so everyone gets to benefit from them. This has allowed Linux to get ported to just about every piece of hardware under the sun. It's either ready-made for your new device or requires very little tweaking to make it work, and then everyone else gets to build on top of that work.
That's what your vape runs on?
Probably.
Probably, yeah.
I was about to say, what, that wouldn't have an operating system, and it's like, nah, it's probably connected to Internet of Things or something.
Gotta run Doom on it.
Oh, yeah, that happened already for sure.
There was a lawnmower recently.
Linux is the operating system kernel behind cable boxes, vending machines, Raspberry Pis, smart devices like refrigerators, Android phones, and on and on. And so I guess this is where we'll come back to that pin that we just put in, right?
Okay.
So because changes to Linux have to be upstreamed, right, which means that they get to continually improve based on everything else that everyone else already did to it, right? BSD does not have that kind of license to it. You can make changes and keep them secret and not share them. So
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that is why consoles are typically, like, their operating systems are typically built on BSD, is because they're like, well, we don't want to share that stuff with other people. You'll also notice too, if you, there are certain...
Well, they don't want to share it. Also, their competitors, I guess.
I'm going to guess I haven't played a Call of Duty game in years. I'm going to guess they still have this part of their menu where it'll be like open source software licenses in the menu because they are built on open source software. Anytime, yeah.
I'm trying to recall.
Now listen, this is always a very small menu option because nobody cares, but legally they have to do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's because of something.
I still
like
have PTSD from the menus from the new Modern Warfare games, which is like
that was probably it. They put the license text on top of the other text. That's probably why you didn't notice it, is because your brain just exploded when you looked at the screen. So over the years, the collaborative development of Linux has led to secure, robust, stable, customizable operating systems. It powers the vast majority of websites that you visit because it's very good at just staying turned on for long periods of time without crashing, slowing down, or needing to reboot for updates. Anyone can use it and do more or less anything they want with it, but who's going to make games for it? So a few attempts from some particularly nerdy game developers have been made over the years, including the likes of Epic Games and id Software in the 90s and early 2000s.
Those guys.
Yeah, but they couldn't seem to will Linux gaming into existence against the market saturation of Microsoft Windows, pre-installed on every computer you find at Best Buy or Walmart. The money just wasn't materializing to support Linux game development. And fun fact, I bought like a brand new copy of Unreal Tournament 2004 back in the day. That came with a Linux install disk right in the box, man.
Really?
That Penguin was on the box.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember that.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah, that was the era where they were trying to do it, but it wasn't working out.
I think I went to Five Below, and I got a copy of Quake 3 Arena years after it came out, but it was the Linux.
Yeah.
It was the Linux version. And I didn't know what the penguin meant. So I wasted $5.
Well, you probably got a box of nerds on the way out or something.
Nah.
So if Valve wants to commandeer Linux to free themselves from relying on the kindness of Microsoft's heart, they could do so, but it was going to take some work and some experimentation. For one thing, DirectX, a Microsoft product that was closed source, was at the heart of most PC games.
Which we talked about in the Xbox episode.
Yeah.
Man, I did reference a bunch of old episodes in this too, but that one I missed.
Mm.
So fast forward back to 2012.
That's why it's called the Xbox.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because of DirectX.
I know.
Copy left.
Phoenix down.
Yeah, exactly. Fast forward back to 2012, and we get the Faster Zombies blog post. In August 2012, Valve ran an experiment where they ported their hit game Left 4 Dead 2 from Windows and DirectX over to Linux and OpenGL. And the Faster Zombies, of course, referred to the fact that the game, not the zombies, was running faster. It was only a 4% performance increase, but it was early days for the port, and it was a good proof of concept that a leaner operating system like Linux could potentially result in better performance.
What year was Left 4 Dead 2? You said that?
2009?
Yeah, 09 or 10.
It wasn't that long after the first one.
Exactly, yeah.
His first was 08?
That might have been 2007.
Yeah. With Left 4 Dead 2 working and the Linux Steam client soon on the way, that was one game down and only a few thousand more to go to fully free themselves from Microsoft. So how are they going to make an attractive market for other companies to port their games to Linux? And the answer was living room gaming PCs.
Oh, yeah.
Or so they hoped anyway.
Oh. I still stand by that concept. Obviously, that's kind of what I'm rocking now, in a way.
Yeah, but yours ran Windows.
It was. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, but that's
I'm
jumping a little bit ahead.
I'm more just saying the pitch of sitting on a couch and on a TV doing computer things.
As the person who built
Fuck desks.
As the person who built that computer
Yes.
that you're using,
I love it.
fuck that shit.
No, I'm sure it was
computers should be big
a
and
nightmare.
huge.
No,
Have tons of airflow.
they got to be quiet and out of the way and look like it's just a regular piece of your entertainment
like a
center.
VCR. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I refer to living room PCs in the past tense in a couple seconds, but we'll see. Hold on.
So things that don't light up and look ridiculous.
Dude, do not tarnish the name of my light up PC with the see-through panel. I seek that feature out on purpose.
You're all nuts.
While
I
we're
don't need a light show to.
RGB rules, and while we're on,
Damn it, you change teams. You
while
used to be
we're,
with
I know. While we're on the Windows subject, they're called home theater PCs. Continue.
I do have that note in here as
Really?
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although it's worth noting that around this time, as far as using living room gaming PCs to ports over to Linux, around this time there were also some big moves being made from Humble Indie Bundles and Unity that created more of a market for Linux ports. This hardly accounts for the majority of games being made, though, especially at the time.
For more on Unity, check in.
Yeah, I thought I had that note. Maybe it's a little bit further down.
That's fine.
This also solves another problem, or at least it gives Valve another pathway for growth. Though this has changed a lot in the past decade, largely because of Valve, PC gaming was still playing second fiddle to console gaming. And coming off of the trend of
Good
home
times.
theater PCs, there it is in the past
Okay,
tense.
yeah.
Valve had its eye on a way to bring PC gaming to the living room. Around 2012, rumors began to circulate around GDC that Valve was prototyping and experimenting with hardware, particularly aimed at conquering the living room. This is the first time we hear people mentioning a Steam box. It'll be referred that way for a while.
Yeah, that name was floating around for years.
Notably predating the release of Windows 8 by months, Valve was already noticing a trend of devices grabbing more control of their ecosystems rather than being more open, even those targeting the living room like an Apple TV or an Xbox 360. And, maybe now's a good time to discuss just how open Valve's ecosystem really is, right? I think a lot of people would describe them as a fairly libertarian company and, principle.
Yeah.
And like, okay, Epic grabs a game for exclusivity. Valve doesn't do that, but what they do instead is like almost as bad or just as bad, where it's like, we built a standard that now everybody is so attached to that porting your game away from Steam takes a lot of work, right? And that is just going to discourage people from doing it anyway, like things like Steam Input, where you can remap controllers and things like that. It's like, Steam VR, of course, like, yeah, they built it, so I guess it makes sense to have it locked down, but like, why isn't that an open standard other than, well, it benefits us, you know? So they do like to talk.
I mean, in that case, there's also hardware.
Yeah, it's like, and we'll get to some of that more too, but it's like they talk a big game about being open, and let's be real, compared to most other companies, they certainly are like more open. But I don't know, it just feels like there's a lot more room there. Yeah, it's like they walk the walk, like, kinda. And because nobody else even talks the talk, then it's like, walking the walk's easier.
When your counterparts are...
like nobody else is claiming that things should be more open because they all want to have their ecosystem.
You're just, by default, going to look like the most open.
It's like a tightrope where the left side is fire and the right side is a safety net, and every company eventually jumps off to the safety net, and Valve is just still riding that tightrope. They're like, we're not going to be that greedy. But we do have to make money.
Yeah, so Valve was building their hardware in-house to fully realize their 10-foot interface, which is to say an interface that can be comfortably used from 10 feet away, like in a living room on a television, and to attempt to solve the problem of a universal controller for PC games. But the rumors at this point were still very clearly that they were looking for hardware partners, PC OEM manufacturers, to make the Steam box itself. And already the connection to Alienware was being made with a recently released PC model, the X51, allegedly being inspired by these partnerships, which we'll get there.
Yeah,
Don't jump ahead.
That's all right. I'm waiting.
After releasing their 10-foot interface as Big Picture mode in September, Valve confirms the rumors on December 9th, 2012. They are working on bringing Steam to the living room with Steam boxes. And though it may seem a distant memory in a future Hot Button episode from the perspective of the year 2024, some of us at the time remembered the ill-fated Phantom console that attempted something similar years earlier. And there are challenges with such a concept that need to be overcome. Price, a lot of mass manufacturing of specialized hardware can bring the cost down. Input, a lot of mouse-driven games, and no great way to translate those to controller, especially if they use a lot of keyboard keys too.
Correct.
Form factor. PCs are big typically because they're made with
non-custom.
They're made with non-specialized parts. Additional game launchers, anything outside of Steam, League of Legends,
that was
Roblox,
a big one.
And the general just wild west of PC gaming as a whole. Nobody really in the PC space, nobody can make you do anything really, other than comply with the law, which in the U.S. isn't a whole lot. So when asked if Valve really believed...
things were not as curated.
When asked if Valve really believed that they could disrupt the whole home console market with a living room gaming PC, they were quoted as saying, and I love this quote, the internet is super smart. If you do something that is cool, that's actually worth people's time, then they'll adopt it. If you do something that's not cool and sucks, you can spend as many marketing dollars as you want, and they just won't. And Austin, I got a note here. Can we, in post, get a sound clip from the Stadia commercial edited in here? When I wrote this, Stadia still had not yet died when I wrote this for the first time. Yeah.
How long did they last, though? It was like 2 years?
Like two years and change, probably. Like they launched in the pandemic when everybody was stuck home playing games. You would think that would be the perfect time. It was the perfect time to prove that idea was never going to work. And they definitely threw marketing dollars after it, like he's saying. But
just the dumbest business model.
Good controller, though. I still use the controller.
Oh, can you? Yeah, you can just use that.
They released a thing to turn it into a Bluetooth controller,
so that way a bunch of people didn't have to throw away a bunch of perfectly working electronics.
By the way,
that wasn't. I held that thing.
If you have a Stadia controller, that program expires at the end of this year, so you can only turn it into a Bluetooth controller until December 31st, 2024. And I recommend it. It's my Steam Deck controller.
I've heard the Luna controller was ass.
I haven't used it, but yeah.
As we enter
Amazon made a bad product? What?
Also, is Luna still a thing?
Yes.
Okay. Trucking along, I suppose.
Ubisoft is paying all of their fees, I guess. As we enter 2013, the momentum of new Steam features after Big Picture continued at a pretty rapid clip.
Hold on. I just thought of something. The Luna thing, when Amazon released Fallout, the show, they got a deal with Amazon Prime Gaming to give all the Fallout games away for free. But New Vegas, because New Vegas and 4, I think, were only available on Luna, and everybody got pissed off because it sucked and didn't work.
It didn't suck when we tried the beta.
It did suck. Is that what you meant?
yeah, that's what I said.
No, you said didn't.
Oh God, no, it sucked. It was terrible. It was a piece of shit. The latency was like insane. It was unusable.
Yeah, and like
the sound.
Stadia worked and still it failed, right? Like that's the thing.
That's true. Yeah, the technology was there.
Yeah, functionally Stadia still got the job done and still people wouldn't adopt it because it was a bad idea. Yeah, exactly. Okay. As we enter 2013, the momentum of new Steam features after Big Picture continued at a pretty rapid clip. There was the Early Access program, new discovery features to attempt the match to right games to the right players, as more games than ever were available on Steam. Steam Broadcasting, which paves the way for in-home streaming. More on that later. And famously, family sharing, which was a feature ripped off of the Xbox One announcement, never implemented for the Xbox, and implemented in Steam before the Xbox One could launch at all.
You're talking about consoles that promise features that never, like...
Well, it's so weird because that's clearly a feature that people like and use and works and like true. Whatever. And like that was supposed to be the answer to the lack of digital ownership. And like and then Microsoft was like, oh, this is bad PR. We got to pull back. It seems like, what if we just did it? You know, like what if we just put that in there? That makes sense.
Also, I assume in terms of hardware, you're going to get into, I'm not going to say the name but little black box. Yep. Okay.
Everybody has their ideas that they get shit on for that later become the norm.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing about we had a whole episode up, but the Xbox One versus PS4 thing out the gate is so funny because that was already the direction that the market was going anyway. They just forced it, and
it's like
really
everyone laughed at Sega Channel, and now there's Game Pass.
No, like the PlayStation Vita.
Yeah, and then you know somebody's punching themselves when the Switch
Microsoft's all digital, always online thing.
Yeah,
Nintendo. I'm sure they've had some good ideas here or there.
Yeah, makers of the Rumble Pack. Rumble was so last gen, and the D-pad
and then like Valve with the when Steam boxes, not to cut you off, but when Steam boxes came out, I couldn't have built that computer. If you asked me to build you a computer now, I could build something way smaller, way cooler looking. There's so many cases that fit on a shelf like that now. That was like the only one at the time.
Dude, when I did overnights for work, just being able to toss that thing into a bag was great.
So finally, in September 2013, Valve formally announces a name for the Steam boxes. Steam machines.
Yeah. That rolls off the tongue, though.
It rolls off the tongue, and also it's another play on Steam some older technology. Okay.
Do they have a product called Steam Engine?
No, not yet.
That's shocking.
No, they've got a bunch of puns on the board, and they're like going to pull them off when the time is appropriate. Okay, so
the chamber.
Targeting release in 2014 in multiple models from multiple manufacturers, 13 of them in total, Valve was going to start with some beta test hardware for a few hundred users. The hardware would run on the Linux-based Steam OS, designed for a console-like experience. And unfortunately, in May 2014, through a forum post, Valve announced that the device rollout was being pushed another year, citing issues with the controller in beta tests. So about that controller.
Wait, but why they didn't want to launch without the controller?
And the controller wasn't ready.
Okay, but I mean, like, 360, like
they'll get there.
Okay,
yeah. All right. So we'll get into our thoughts on the final design shortly, but that thing went through so many different iterations. There were versions with physical trackballs, programmable buttons in the middle with LCD screens to show you what you had mapped to them.
Tell me this thing could have been worse.
Hey, listen, man, we're going to get to your thoughts on the final design shortly, I said. Programmable buttons in the middle with LCD screens to show you what you had mapped to them. I remember there were keyboards at the time that were trying to pitch that feature too.
Yeah, I remember that as well.
And a variety of iterations mixing and matching those elements. Eventually, they settled on a dual touchpad design driven by haptic feedback that could simulate tons of additional functionality. And around the time of the beta test, the controller was focused around 2 trackpads and buttons that surrounded them. And after the delay, it turned into a design that was sort of like symmetrical, like a Wii U Pro controller, but with the trackpads instead of analog sticks, which made it more easily mappable to the standard Xbox controller that most people played controller-friendly PC games with at the time. So like it still had all the same buttons. It's just that like they surrounded the right trackpad. So it's like if you're trying to think about where A, B, X, Y are.
I'm just funny that like a lot of this is hinging on that controller when like the boxes themselves were done. And people were already using 360 controllers pretty regularly.
And we'll get there. But if you think about it too, like the input is one of those like major challenges that we listed before, right? And I don't think it's a trivial one. Maybe in hindsight, now that we've seen like the full power of the expanded on version of Steam input, but
dude, half the people in this group have that thing right there, that little the $20 wireless Logitech keyboard with the fucking little touchscreen, and it's like. I think a touchpad. Sorry.
For listeners. That would be an expensive peripheral.
I don't even have to describe it because everyone knows what that is. I feel like Best Buy sells those by like the box load, but it is like I think I played all of Inscription on it.
I have 3 of these.
Yeah, I think I have 2.
I don't think I see those anywhere except when I come here.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I think Brett bought one the other day too. Like, we saw that one there.
So now, Randy, let's talk about our feelings on that controller, knowing that I think I'm the only one in the room who likes it.
Sorry.
We're going to play, I'll be the middle ground, even though I don't like it. But I think I like it more than you do.
All right. You knocked it in the garbage at your house by accident, and I think it just stayed there for a while.
To be fair, that was because I lost the dongle.
I only play it wired anyway, but Randy knows how much I hate batteries, so.
No, I love batteries. They're the greatest.
Well, I think it's a little better now that like AA lithiums are more common and better at their job.
But Austin changed my life when he showed me Endoloops, and it's a thing just being like rechargeable batteries.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, sorry. I think I'm talking about controllers with built-in batteries because I hate that. Give people the option.
Oh, no, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
But I remember back in the day, we felt the same about when batteries like that sucked. So we both wired our stuff because we didn't.
Being tethered to. It's like I remember like it's it's like the PS5 controller or whatever, the DualSense. I like that controller, but that battery is like 2 hours,
and there's no way to swap it.
Yeah. And like
you want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
The DualSense Edge, the $200 version, has worse battery life.
That's bad.
I went over to a friend's house. We were playing a game together, and we played it for like 3 hours, and the controller was almost dead. Yeah.
So we started off this conversation about our feelings on the Steam controller and got to a rant about the DualSense, which is weird and kind of funny.
No, I still love the DualSense.
But
doesn't have buttons that feel like shit.
Well, so that's the thing. Like, I don't think these buttons feel bad at all.
They're tiny.
They are tiny, but I don't think they're too small.
And the shoulder buttons?
The shoulder buttons, I will say, I think the triggers are good. I don't like the bumpers. Like, I'm gonna actually hold this up to the mic. Yeah. You can definitely hear that. And it's like they are.
I love a good mouse click on my controllers.
The thing is, it's that the throw on them is a little.
I don't like the bumpers or the triggers on that thing.
I don't remember the joystick. Give me this fucking thing.
So, and the. Well, yeah, here we go. Toss it. No, I will not.
You're gonna leave that all in.
So the triggers are very much they're very similar to the GameCube in that they are analog but with a click at the end, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that allows for a lot of
the GameCube because they're terrible.
What? Oh man, guys, I'm sorry about Austin just being absolutely losing his mind for a second.
The GameCube controller is one of the best controllers ever. The triggers are not good.
The triggers have too much throw for Smash Brothers, but that's besides the point.
That's the only thing they're needed for.
No, they're also needed for Monkey Ball.
Yeah,
they're really good for Monkey Ball.
For Monkey Ball?
You don't need anything for Monkey Ball. But what about the in Mario Sunshine where you shoot the flood at it and you go halfway and then you go all the way?
Sunshine's bad.
I'm not even that much of a defender of Sunshine.
So I'll say, but
I like it just fine.
We'll get my feelings first since I already started. But I think the buttons feel fine. They are smaller. They are in a different.
They're like little Tic Tacs, dude.
They're in the spot where the right stick typically is on like the PlayStation or Xbox controllers. So that might be a little strange for some. They're like almost in that spot. They're not quite as far down.
They're also like these are too close together. I feel like your thumbs like perfectly touch.
My thing with this controller, the Steam Deck, which I'm sure you'll get to way later.
I like the shape.
Has completely like flipped my opinion on this controller. If they had just made the buttons bigger and reversed it so the touchpads were where the right stick and the D-pad were.
That one I disagree with because
But that's how the Steam Deck is.
So I like that controller a whole lot. The bumpers are not my favorite, but they work. And the things that
I like the bumpers more than these. There's no give on these top buttons at all.
You like the bumpers more than the triggers?
I do.
Huh, interesting. I think the triggers.
I don't really like either, but I still don't.
So
like
they have this dual touchpad design because
is
solving
this mini USB. It makes sense at the time.
Yeah, at the time, yes, it was mini. But so
mini or micro?
It's mini.
Mini, I think.
The PS3 one?
No.
PS4 one?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's micro.
That's micro. Okay.
Sorry,
it's not USB-C. It predates it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So it's mini, USB A, USB B, mini, micro, USB C. Get it right.
Also, these menu buttons are mushy as shit, but how often are you hitting them? So
exactly. So you have well, first off, too, this controller was $10 cheaper than the equivalent Xbox or PlayStation at the time. So that was $50 instead of $60, which shows that they were conscious of price. The other thing, though, is that they went with the dual trackpad design instead of dual analog sticks. Now, they do have a left analog stick on this controller. Here's the thing, like, the trackpads are trying to solve the input problem of the mouse, right? Which is huge. And the fact that they had two of them was trying to solve the input problem of a keyboard-driven game with a lot of hotkeys. Yeah. So you could do all kinds of crazy remapping stuff on this controller using, the Steam interface. There are ways to do it outside of Steam. That's part of the ecosystem problem I was describing before, is that is not easy. But the thing is like, I can't think of a single job that I think the right stick does better than the right trackpad. But I never use the left trackpad for anything except as a bad D-pad. So
there is a D-pad indentation on it.
So yeah, because it is intended to substitute for a D-pad when you need one in a pinch. But you're never playing a platformer with that thing unless you're really desperate.
I like clicking these in though.
Yeah, I mean,
I remember using it for. It's the haptics. It's. I don't know. Maybe it's I remember when you played Borderlands with this, and I was I couldn't imagine an FPS.
So no. Here's the thing, right? Is when first-person shooters went
to turn fast, but it's so inaccurate.
So for those kids out there, okay, first-person shooters went to dual analog in the early 2000s, and it was at the time when you went to that from GoldenEye, you're wow, this makes so much more sense. Unless you're that one game reviewer who was scared off by that Alien versus Predator game.
No,
it
was Alien Resurrection, I think. Yeah.
But aside from that guy, everybody basically picked up dual analog, and you're oh, no, this makes a lot more sense. Well, let me get there.
Okay.
So the thing that does is that, dual analog always had, it was better than what we had before, but it never felt great to me. It was just kind of the thing that you did because this is how you play it with a controller. But the thing that makes that controller so good it's not as good as a keyboard and mouse if you really want the precision, but it's so close. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is the gyroscopic controls. So when you are tilting it around and moving it around in space.
Playing Splatoon?
Well, that's the thing. Exactly. Splatoon showed me that it was a good idea, and then this controller came out after that. When you can just map any mouse input to the gyroscope, you can get the really fine tuning you would use the gyroscope for, and then you use the right pad for the very quick movements that you will never be able to get on a dual analog setup without sacrificing the precision. So
there's
it's the left. It's being able to control
you're talking about it from you play mostly console games.
Yeah,
and he's talking about it from PC gamer perspective.
But I still play.
I know, but I hated it because I play a lot of the games that I play require way more button input precision than they do right stick precision.
Right.
You know what I mean? And having
so.
little buttons that were off from where I'm used to them being was way more of a detriment.
Third-person action games or
first-person shooters. Was way more of a detriment than having a more precise input for the right stick was a positive.
This seems like it was more designed to solve the problem of how do you play Civ on a controller?
It absolutely was that. In fact, Civ 5 was demoed on it when they launched Steam machines.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then we'll get to it in the Steam Deck, but the Steam Deck is 10 years down the road, them iterating on this, and it's just the amount of... I understand that thing's $600, but the amount of shit that you can do with the Steam Deck controls, with the 2 touchpads, and a D-pad, and an analog stick, and another analog stick, and buttons, and then they have, the haptics on top of the thumbsticks where you can map it so that if you're resting your thumb on the thumbstick, it'll change the input from when your thumb is off.
So, and that one doesn't have it on the thumbstick, but it does have that same kind of programmability on the trackpad. So the way that they demoed it was, hey, turn the gyroscope on whenever your thumb is on the trackpad. I didn't like that. This controller does have 2 rear paddles, which are becoming more and more common, I think.
Yeah. And I hate those.
You hate the rear paddles?
I hate paddles.
They on this one, they
don't add more buttons. We figured it out.
Yeah, we did.
If your game needs more buttons, just scrap it.
I definitely disagree with that because so they are usually used, especially when you're playing a game that already works on controller, they're usually used just to add an additional place to press the same button. But when you're using that controller and you're trying to map it for, something where you're doing a lot of aiming, which is, again, I think is a job that dual analog is bad at, when you're doing that, you can turn the gyro on and off with a rear paddle, which is how I like to do it. So the way I like to play a game, like when I was playing Borderlands,
this is so complicated.
Well, no, it is more complicated, but it just feels better to me, right? And so it's
personal preference.
Yeah, so
no accounting for taste.
Quick movements with the pad, hold the paddle, and then the gyro is enabled, and then I can get those really precise movements, and I can get headshots like easily, right?
So do I, because the aim assist has been a thing for like ever.
Well, we're talking about mapping PC games to a controller.
So
PC games don't have aim. Didn't have aim assist.
I've tested a bunch of genres, and again, my opinion is I can't find a job that the right stick does that pad doesn't do better, and I'm going to put an asterisk there when it plays nicely together, because the other big...
What about Tony Hawk?
What do you use the right stick for in Tony Hawk?
I was thinking of Skate. Sorry,
that would be terrible. On
Skate. You need the two.
I don't know. I've never gotten.
You have to flick and stuff.
Too bad Skate's not on PC, so it doesn't matter.
There are ways to replicate that kind of thing, but you're right. I've never tried.
I was just trying to. Or what about like Geometry Wars?
So that's a twin stick, right?
Yeah.
So I played a lot. I played a lot of Streets of Rogue on that thing, and that is a twin stick shooter. That not only is it determining like which direction are you pointing the right stick in, but also when you're doing something like throwing a grenade in Streets of Rogue, depending on how far you put the stick is going to determine where the grenade gets thrown, like distance-wise. And that is easier on that trackpad too. So not only is it direction, but it's also distance.
My last final thoughts I'm going to say, the best compliment I can give, it's a good weight. It does not feel like
it's a better weight with batteries in it, to be honest.
Because you talked about fair enough, but it's like you talked about the Wii U Pro controller, and that thing feels like a feather.
Oh, this is so much better.
I know.
Wii U controller's garbage.
No, it's terrible. But also the one final thing I don't like though, don't put gloss on the controller.
So
I agree with that.
If you hold that thing in your hands again, right? And I want you to see like where you put your fingers, your thumbs, like whatever, as you're gripping it. Your skin is never going to make contact with the glossy parts.
I don't care. You can make it matte, and it would be better.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think it looks nice, but
I don't like gloss on anything. To be fair, I'm not even discriminating.
I feel that way about my guitars as well.
Yeah. I control consoles.
If I had enough money, I would get my car matte. Coated.
But let me just
the last thing I'll say to this controller's benefit. I remember it came out the same day as Shadow the Tomb Raider. Yes,
that would make sense.
I remember it launched.
It launched.
No. Rise. It would have been Rise because first Tomb Raider was 2013.
No. I remember it was Fallout 4. I think was one of the games you were trying to play, and
we went to a midnight. You bought Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
Sean Chambers bought Fallout.
Okay.
And I already bought Fallout on Steam, and I just bought that.
Okay.
And I was the only person in line that bought the Steam controller, and I went home and I played Fallout and went, this thing sucks. It might have been that Fallout 4 sucked.
That's believable.
Because it turns out that game does not control that well
on anything.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
How's the battery life?
Fine. I mean, I mostly play it
Double
wired,
A's.
so don't.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. But no, the asterisk I wanted to come back to is that this thing plays best when. So I basically, if your game says it supports controller, but you have to switch back and forth to a mouse, I'm not going to play it with a controller. If it says that it supports controller, but giving it a mouse input takes away the controller glyphs, I'm not going to play it with the Steam controller, because if you start taking away my Xbox button prompts,
most games
it makes me angry when that happens.
I agree.
So yeah, the things that I use that controller for are the ones where this is where it plays nicest with it, is where it has gamepad support properly to show you the proper button glyphs. And also when you give it a mouse input, not clicking, but just moving the mouse around, does it change the controller glyphs?
Yeah.
And there are some games that don't allow you to simultaneously send the mouse and keyboard input and the gamepad input without switching what mode it's in.
Yeah.
So like Resident Evil 7, like there are ways to configure the controller inputs to make it kind of feel like a mouse, but sometimes you can't get it to feel just right. Like so Metal Gear Solid 5, I could configure to play just right, even though it doesn't play nicely.
I go back with
but Resident Evil 7, I could not configure to do it that way.
And Overwatch and stuff, I'll use keyboard in the menu, and then I'll instantly pick up a controller, Call of Duty or whatever. But and it's funny you mentioned Resident Evil 7. So I remember Matt had that issue where he was playing on mouse and keyboard, and he couldn't get past a section because every time he walked forward, because on WASD you can't really crawl.
It's digital.
It's digital.
There'll usually be a modifier for it, right?
I don't know if he knew that or there was, but I told him, he was just like, I keep getting caught. Like, I'm trying to be stealthy, I'm trying to be quiet. And I was like, switch to a controller, and then you can have a little bit more minutia in there. I know it's a specific case, or finesse rather, but yeah. The one last thing also about the Steam controller.
That's the third time
I know that I've said that. I'm curious as to when they delayed it a year, but when it came out, it still felt premature because like all these games didn't have things built for them yet. Now it's not an issue. Like, well,
the idea was that Steam input would handle that.
Yeah,
and you map the controls yourself.
And they had 3 default.
That's so much work.
Well, no, they had 3 default templates, and those covered the vast majority of use cases. If we're being real, tweaking values beyond that,
and then later they crowdsourced it.
Okay, so that's why
if you go on Steam input now, you can find like people can upvote things, and you find the most.
It wasn't even that much later, honestly.
No, it wasn't that much later.
It was pretty soon after launch.
So we can move on.
Yeah, so Steam Machines officially launched in November of 2015, but there were some problems. The long delay left hardware partners out in the cold. The flagship Steam machine, the Alienware Alpha, which Randy and I both had, was ready to go by the original 2014 date, but whether or not the controller was the only issue, Valve was unwilling to let Steam machines rock at that point. So PCs like the Alienware Alpha were sold with Windows 8 ahead of the Steam machine's launch with an Xbox controller.
That's what you got,
yeah. That's right. Mine came with the controller.
It came with Windows, and it came with a 360 controller.
Yes, it did.
Because you bought it before the Steam machines officially launched.
After the launch of Steam machines, the Windows machine would sit side by side next to the SteamOS-based Steam machine on the same page, and would sometimes even be slightly cheaper. The Windows one.
Oh yeah,
and so
I got mine for cheaper.
This is why I also bought the Windows version.
And there was 4. We both have the there's like an i3, 2 different i5 ones and an i7 one.
I think mine was
they had different graphic, like
maybe
hard drive space.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest one. I think they all had like an NVIDIA 860 at the time or something like that.
Okay.
And so I
was able to play like Destiny and stuff.
Yeah, so I'll get to some more. I'll get to some more of my experiences with that in a second.
No, me too. I have a lot to say about it.
But yeah, like
I'm a defender of that.
Even though I immediately, like, once I bought it, like I think because Matt Noodleboom, who's also been on this podcast as a guest before, he and I were roommates at the time, and I remember his primary concern at the time was playing Hearthstone on it, which needed Windows.
Mine was Overwatch, so it was like I needed that launcher.
So we had a dual boot. Where I threw on SteamOS right away because I wanted the console-like experience, but with my Steam library, and he wanted to be able to play Hearthstone. And other than Hearthstone, I think we ended up just leaving it on SteamOS most of the time because, this is jumping ahead a little bit of where I originally had it written, but, there are a lot of things on Windows that will just make you have to Alt-Tab or take out a keyboard to like enter a password or something, right? Like updates come in, there's no way to do that with the controller. So SteamOS does solve a lot of those problems in making the console-esque experience.
Not with Windows 8.
I didn't have a choice because I know I literally referenced all 3 of these games already, but it was like that was the time I was playing Overwatch, Siege, and Destiny 2. So I needed also the Uplay fucking thing, and so it was like.
Yeah.
I mean, I
was also using it as my main computer.
Yeah, yours also came with Windows, so you weren't gonna put SteamOS on it.
Yeah.
You bought it before the SteamOS version came out.
But I also used it as a browser and for Discord and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure why the Windows machine was cheaper, but I suspect it's because it was subsidized by bloatware, which does happen, where it's like you'll get a trial for Norton and a trial for Office and whatever. And
I think I did.
Yeah, and so those things, because they're advertisements built into your computer, they tend to bring the price down, but I'm not sure I don't know for a fact that that's why it was cheaper sometimes.
You're making me miss mine.
You've got a better one now.
I know, but mine eventually did die. I don't know if it what was the issue it had? It had the yellow light of death or something they called it. I don't
Something
remember.
blew up.
Something melted. Yeah, I don't know how good the airflow was inside.
Though Valve
I ran it to the ground. But
I took that thing apart. The airflow is not great.
yeah.
It's essentially a laptop without a screen.
Yeah.
Though Valve
I
never
bet it could be fixed, though.
No, I couldn't.
I'll,
Not by me.
I'll tell John. That's who I gave it to.
Though Valve never officially released sales numbers, the best estimates people were able to deduce were that they sold fewer than 500,000 units in the first 7 months. Some high-profile games were getting Linux ports ahead of the Steam Machine's launch, including Rocket League, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, and Tomb Raider.
Oh, you mean Epic's Rocket League?
That's the one, yeah. Yeah, that no longer has a Linux version. They stopped supporting it.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn, I knew they took it off Steam, but that's like...
They gave me the option to refund,
Okay.
but
take it?
no, I just left it in my Steam account
Okay.
for reasons we'll get to later. But
Right.
what do you call it? Yeah, these releases started to dry up when Steam machines weren't selling through. The Witcher 3 and Street Fighter 5 famously announced SteamOS versions, and then they never materialized.
Huh.
At a relatively high price point compared to consoles, the value proposition for a Steam machine was rough. In a best-case scenario, for about $100 more, you'd get similar or worse performance as a PS4.
Yeah.
Console games are often optimized around their hardware in a way that PC games aren't, after all. Well,
Damn
that's
straight.
less and less true as time goes on.
There was a time.
There was a time where that was more the case. I wrote the script 2 years ago. What's more is that performance in SteamOS running the same game as Windows on the same hardware would often result in double-digit percentages of performance lost. Running the SteamOS version, keep in mind the Faster Zombies blog post from before, they were expecting to get better performance. So some of this was...
mine being okay.
Well,
Again,
you were running it on Windows.
Oh, sorry.
This is the SteamOS equivalent of the same game.
Okay.
So, in my personal experience, right, I tested Shadow of Mordor, like for like, on our dual boot that I just mentioned. Yeah. And yeah, I saw the same thing. Yeah, I was getting, man, I'm not going to remember the exact numbers at this point, but let's just say I was getting like high 40 FPS on the Windows version, and then probably like low 30s on SteamOS. And yeah, like I could see that replicated.
Question.
We'll get there.
I don't want to cut you off. This is pre-Vulkan.
Yes.
Right? This is OpenGL.
This is exactly the reason why.
Yeah, okay.
Austin says, looking into the future, and also having proofread this script 2 years ago.
Yeah. I was in a coma in between reading the script and now, so I don't remember shit. FYI.
So some of this was caused by developers not being used to working with OpenGL rather than DirectX. But also, DirectX got some noticeable improvements since the Faster Zombies blog post. The DirectX team...
Sorry, does Faster Zombies blog post
shut
3
up.
times faster?
Faster Zombies blog post... No, I'm not going to do it. All right. The DirectX team loved the blog post because it actually got the suits at Microsoft to reinvest in DirectX at a time that the project was on quote-unquote life support. And
that's crazy. DirectX being on
life support.
It was just deprioritized at the time. And then they're like, oh man, we're getting the pants beat off of us by this thing that Microsoft doesn't own. Get the president on the line. Limited to just the Linux compatible portion of the Steam library, Valve intended to make up for this gap with in-home streaming from another machine in your home. But at that point, why not just buy the $50 Steam Link?
Yeah.
That's right. Alongside the Steam Machine launch was this insanely cheap device, the Steam Link, that did the same thing you'd be doing with a Steam Machine for any of the big games you wanted to play that didn't have Linux versions, which was most of them.
Yeah, I love the Steam Link. I actually got a lot. I still have it connected. I mean, now it's just like an app, right? I mean, it's like built. It's like you don't need a physical.
I have it built into my TV.
Right, but it was one of the things I used to do with it. And by the way, this is why when I got the PlayStation TV and tried to use that for the same purpose, and it was awful. I would, but it was my computer is downstairs, my bedroom is upstairs. And for the longest time, I would use the Steam Link not just to play games on my bed, but actually just to stream my desktop, and then I could just like watch whatever.
Yep.
And it was pretty seamus. And so then
it
was
somewhat recently, actually.
Yeah, and I'm glad it's still like support. I don't know why it wouldn't be, but
I remember when COVID happened.
Yeah,
and we're all stuck inside our homes, and it was like, I had like this big ass TV, but me, Matt, and Chris all play PC games all the time. I was playing Yakuza 7.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a turn-based RPG.
I don't need to lug my rig down here.
I don't need I could deal with a little input latency. So I just downloaded the Android Steam Link app and streamed it down to the TV and played most of that game on the TV.
But that thing also tricked me into thinking that that Sony could do it just as well, because when the PlayStation TV came out, which I know we've talked about this before, one of the features it has, and it's funny because I've been messing around with one recently. but it's like was streaming for PS4 games, and I was like,
remote
all right,
play.
remote play, yeah. So I was like, all right, great. I can do the exact same thing, and I tried to. I think it was like Soma, and it was like, which is not a fast paced game, but it was do you call it artifacting? It was just constant like black block, and the resolution would look like it was
artifacting,
awful,
color banding.
Yeah, it was aggressive, and also the input delay was bad. It was like a second.
Did it look like
the same
like when
distance.
ship buffers, or did it just look like the colors weren't like there was no gradient to the colors?
I think both.
Yeah, because color
rotten.
banding is when the color data gets so fragmented that you can't, like, if there's a light and it goes from black to white, the thing can't load every color, so it looks like blocks of black and white.
And I know that thing wasn't received well at the time, but it's like now everybody's kind of got that figured out, at least on local networks. Like
Sony sucks because remote play used to work. When I had a Vita and a PS3, it worked really
I've heard
well.
between those devices.
And then they like updated it, so it had to like check in with a server or some shit, and then it never worked again.
Yeah. I know, you've used
they
the
were
Xbox
like, we can't
one
use
a
it.
bunch of times.
We can't use it on. Well, XCloud is probably the best version of the cloud streaming I've used, but that's not.
Oh, well, they have a local one too, don't they?
They did. It wasn't.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So to put together this entire series of unfortunate events,
let's get moving all my boxes around then.
Steam machines launched late at too high of a price point, with a smaller library than a Windows PC, with worse performance than a Windows PC.
Woof.
And while it would personally take me several more years to be convinced that Microsoft had given up on its plans to drive you to their own store for all of your software, Steam customers were not convinced of this doomsday scenario.
How much was the cheapest box was $400?
That sounds right.
And then 800?
I think it was I think the cheapest box was 600 at launch.
No, it was
sale.
so I put it in there. It was $100 more. So the cheapest one was $500, I think.
Okay.
But the range was so high, you could get like a $1,300.
Yeah, I did see those too. But
on,
they also,
on one of the other OEMs.
I bought my thing when they slashed the prices. Like,
so yeah, for the listeners,
it didn't take that long.
Okay, so this is I didn't jot down the exact specs of every Steam machine. But for the listeners at home, just a reminder: those like 13 vendors, most if not all of them made it to the final product release. But it was very low margins for them, so a lot of them dropped out pretty early. And that Alienware one was the flagship for a reason, because if it wasn't the cheapest, it was definitely the best performance for your dollar.
Yeah, because I remember there was like a Origins PC one that never came out, and then there was like
there was at least one Origins PC one.
Yeah. I don't remember.
But yeah, so most of them were more expensive than the Alienware one, and didn't give you as much bang for your buck. Yeah. So that's really where we left that.
The Alienware one is still like, it's shocking how small that is.
Yeah, anything that I have to say about
change the colors.
Anything I have to say about the price and performance, the best case scenario is this Alienware one, which still lagged behind what you would get for the same dollar on a console.
Yeah.
And what year was this? 2014?
2015.
2015? It's crazy.
When did like the PS4 Pro and like the Xbox One S 2017?
Xbox One X was 2017. PS4 Pro might have been 2016.
Yeah.
So
trying to figure out
as for my own opinion on Steam machines, the one thing that I think they did nail was a feature called Steam Comp MGR, which I'm pretty sure is Steam Compositor Manager, which is some special sauce that SteamOS uses that allows for capturing the game window in a particular way that makes PC games behave very console-like, which is what I was talking about before.
Yeah.
So here at the turn is probably where I think we're going to wrap up this first part of a two-parter on Valve and hardware. And we'll come back with the next one. Go to Austin for plugs.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for listening. You can find all of our episodes on other hardware like the Xbox or the Dreamcast, both of which were mentioned.
Yeah. And the PlayStation.
And the PlayStation. And Nintendo shit. At Hot Button Cast, hotbuttoncast.com.
Running zombies.
And then you can follow, subscribe, like, whatever verb I'm supposed to use for podcast services, Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever.
Yeah.
And also, our RSS feed and YouTube and all that nonsense. And you can follow our socials for information when part 2 comes out, as well as our future episodes at Hot Button Cast, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Yeah, and thank you for hosting.
Yes.
Sorry for
Thanks for having
arguing about
glad-
the Steam controller for like 20
Oh, I'm
minutes.
glad we finally got to this episode. 'Cause it's, like you said, it's been in the
Yeah, I mean,
It's
oven
been
for
cooking.
a while.
if you guys want me to write another script, I could start now and we could have it out by 2028.
Before Elder Scrolls 6? That's crazy.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.